Hello NASCAR fans, Chris Terrell here with dailyfantasysportsrankings.com, DFSR.com for short, to bring you my look at my post-qualifying picks for the Daytona 500 for both DraftKings and FanDuel, as well as a look into my DFS NASCAR Xfinity Sheet, which is back this year. We've got the Racing Experience 300 this afternoon. Qualifying is about to get underway in about 15-20 minutes. Before we get into that, I'm going to show you how to navigate and find my weekly preview article. So you're on DFSR.com. If you scroll down to the article section here and click on NASCAR, click see today's picks, it's going to put you into my article. I kind of go over the track every single week, as well as look at some track history, track type history, that sort of thing. Strategy is the big thing I'm going to be looking into this year, and then I look at my top targets. These targets are drivers that came after qualifying because we had the qualifying races on Saturday night. Each and every week this is going to be some pre-fault qualifying picks that I am looking at, and then in this video and as well as the live video on Sunday mornings, that's where I'm going to be looking at my post-qualifying, post-practice picks. That's going to be all the information in for that week, and that is the most important thing when playing DFS NASCAR, is to have all that information in your model before going ahead and constructing your lineups. There's one more NASCAR practice this afternoon. Daytona is a little bit different in terms of the way they run their weekend. Like, there was qualifying last Sunday that set the front two rows, and then they had the dual races on Thursday, which set the inside and outside rows for the rest of the race. So we do have all that qualifying information. There was a practice yesterday, so there's been 3 practices so far. The fourth one, like I said, is this afternoon, I believe around 3 p.m. Eastern. Not looking too much at practice information in my model this week on a super speedway. For strategy, kind of what we're looking for and what I talked about in my article is place differentials king here. Looking back at some optimal lineups from all Daytona races, including the summer race, like over the last 4, there's been no more than 1 driver start in top 10 who's been in the optimal lineup, with almost all of the drivers coming from outside the top 20 and at least 2 or 3 outside the top 30. There was an outlier year when Ryan Blaney was the top guy. I believe he finished 4th that year, but he led 118 laps. That was 2018 Daytona 500, I believe. So that was a little bit of an outlier, but still, he was the only driver inside the top 10 in that optimal lineup anyway. Everything else was 14th, 6th. I believe there was 2 mid-range, and then everything else was outside the top 20. So place differential is really what we're looking for this week. So that's what I'm going to talk about in my article in this video. Before I jump into the Cup side of things, let's take a look at the Xfinity Sheet that's back this year. So it looks very similar as if you're familiar with my DFS NASCAR sheets. This is very similar. This week I've got track history, track type history, last 10 races on Daytona and Talladega in there as well. I've built a database with race information so I can get DraftKings averages and stuff as well. There is a lot more coming to this Xfinity Sheet. I'm going to have current form, season form, the track type. I've actually gone in that database that I've built and split it up into tracks like short flat tracks, super speedways, road courses, intermediate tracks, the longer intermediate tracks that are flatter. So I'm just splitting it up so we can have the best information possible when building our lineups in the Xfinity Series. Very excited about the Xfinity Series this year. We had 3 drivers in Tyler Reddick, Cole Custer, and Christopher Bell. They're all off to the Cup Series, so we've seen all 3 of the top drivers in last year's Xfinity Series are gone. So we've got a crop of kids now. There's a limit to how many races Cup drivers can race, so we're going to have a lot of Xfinity driver only races. That's really what I'm looking at, because when you get those Cup drivers, especially like Kyle Busch, I believe he's doing 5 races in the Xfinity Series this year. When he gets into the Xfinity Series, we see his price skyrocket around $13,000-$14,000 on DraftKings. That pushes other guys down, but in a lot of cases Kyle's going to dominate that race, lead, get all the dominator points, and possibly win that race. There's a very high percentage of that happening, so you almost have to have him, so you're really looking at a bunch of stars and scrubs builds. You can really go about things a little bit different when those Cup drivers aren't in the race. So as you can see, we've got Justin Allgaier, Chase Briscoe, Austin Cindric, Ross Chastain, and Michael Annett are your top 5 drivers, all between 10 and 11,000. Looking at their track history, Ross Chastain's the one that stands out to me the most right now over his last 4 Daytona races. He's got 3 top 10s and finished all 4 inside the top 20. He leads both those categories. Got some laps led in there as well. Average finish of 8.3. So right now he's number 1 in my model. I put a little bit of weight so far into practice 1. Practice 2, like I said, qualifying is happening right now while I'm recording this video. I will have that data updated as well as my picks highlighted on here as well. And if you have any questions, if you're playing Xfinity, make sure to get into that DFSR chat room. I'm going to be in there leading up to lineup lock as well, which I believe is at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. So with Xfinity, I'm going to move on to Cup now. I do have some highlighted plays here. I went through how to use the cheat sheet, what all these stats mean in my tutorial video, so make sure to check that on the YouTube channel as well. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time going over each and every one of those categories here, but as you can see, we've got track history, which is the last 2 years at Daytona, including the summer. We've got career track history at Daytona. We've got track type history, which is Daytona, Talladega. I've got DraftKings FanDuel averages just from 2019, which was when they changed it from restrictor plates to the tapered spacer. So we've got that information. I just wanted to draw a 1-year sample size of that with the new setup. It was fairly similar, but there were some differences. So that's kind of what I'm going to be drawing all season in terms of track type history, is putting the 2019 rules package together and giving you that information and kind of narrowing it down a little bit more in terms of research. So this would be 2019 form, season form. You can see how they've been doing. Practices, we've got practice 1, 2, and 3. Practice 4, like I said, this afternoon. We know the qualifying order as of now. There were some changes. The guys that I have labeled here in pink are going to the rear of the field on pace laps to start the race, either because they changed gears or I'd have to look at the exact specifics. I believe Blaney had damage in terms of gears. I believe that was Ty Dillon who had to change a gear. He's going to the rear. Corey LaJoie, BJ McLeod, and Brendan Poole. All those drivers will keep their starting positions for fantasy, but they will be starting from the rear of the field, so they're going to be starting with a negative place differential if you're playing them. Probably best for GPP only. One driver out of that group that I will consider is Ryan Blaney. He's going to be only going from 27th to 40th at the start of the race. Actually, he's going to be he's going to be ahead of all these other guys, so he's probably going to be in about the 35th, 36th starting position to start the race. So I mean, that's only a negative, somewhere in the range, depending on exactly where he starts, 7 to 9, 7 to 10 negative, and he can easily get back up to the front. So people are going to avoid him because he's going to the back. I definitely like it with his 27th starting position. I'm going to be changing, and you'll see on the other cheat he's going to be a GPP play just because he's going to the back, but I believe the upside's there. And for the most part, I'm playing GPP only on this slate. There's just so much variance in NASCAR alone, let alone we're talking super speedway racing, and especially the Daytona 500. As you can see, the clash was absolutely nuts. Call it the crash from now on, the Busch crash. Duels were a little bit different racing just because those are their Daytona 500 cars. So if they wreck those cars in the duels, they have to go to a backup car and thus start at the back of the pack. They lose their pit stall selection there as well. So that's why we've seen maybe a little bit more conservative racing on Thursday night. But nevertheless, one thing we can draw from watching Thursday night is that manufacturers are definitely going to work together. It's expanded outside of just the team realm, so like JGR and all 4 of them working together. Now, in terms of manufacturers out there, Chevy's got the most on the track. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, and then it's Ford, and Toyotas only have 5. So it's a little bit tougher for the Toyotas in terms of working together. But as we've seen last year, they definitely worked well together with the Chevys. I don't think we're going to see that a whole bunch this year. Maybe makes the Toyota guys a little bit more of a risk, but I'm not completely concerned. I'm going to get into those picks here shortly. Starting with Denny Hamlin, of course, my top 2 core plays in the top tier, looking at, say, let's go $9,000 and up on DraftKings, is Hamlin and Kyle Busch. Talking about Toyotas, and the only reason is their starting positions, 21st and 28th. Hamlin has been just excellent here. He's won the Daytona 500 twice now, 2016 and 2019. He has actually been quite better at the Daytona 500 than the Daytona Summer. His last, looking at his 500 results here, he's got 1st, 3rd, 17th, 1st, 4th, 2nd. Those are his last 5 Daytona 500s. Not too bad in terms of the summer, but his last 3 summer races were 26th, 38th, and 24th, and 17th. So the last 4 were all outside the top 17. Not ideal, but the Daytona 500 is definitely a place he shine. Starting 21st gives you that place differential upside. He was top 10 in all 3 practices, not looking deep into those practices, but it is nice to see that he does have a fast car out there on the track. And I mean, I wasn't able to watch closely to all of those practices, kind of see what each team's motivation was. You know, some practices they're going to be working on drafting, some practices they're going to be working on coming to pit road, they're going to be working with old tires, working with new tires, working with teammates, doing single car runs. So there's a lot going on out there, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm not really looking at practice time so much. But I will look at it to see, you know, who's got a fast car versus who doesn't, who needs to make adjustments here in this final practice to get the speed out of their car. But again, the Daytona 500 field really opens up to almost anyone being able to win this race. So keep that in mind when you're building lineups as well. So then with Kyle Busch, he started even farther back, so you get 7 more place differential upside points there. He was top 15 in all 3 practices as well. He hasn't been as good. He's definitely not the biggest of fans of the super speedway racing. He's more of a driver that likes to be in control. Short tracks, that's why we see him succeed. He succeeds on all tracks. He's won at every single track out there besides the Roval now, but definitely super speedways are not his best. So looking at his last 6 races, he's only got 1 top 10. That was last year. He finished runner-up right behind Denny Hamlin in the Daytona 500. It's kind of on his bucket list. He has not won. He's won pretty much all the prestigious races out there, 2 championships now. He is really looking for that Daytona 500, so I think he's kind of getting into that kind of team mindset, maybe being a little bit less aggressive early on in the race and kind of riding it out, and because you can't win the Daytona 500 or have a shot at it if you don't make it to the end. We've seen a lot of times where there's only 10 to 12 cars left on that lead lap. So one thing it is going to come down to, if we do see multiple wrecks, which is probably going to happen, is how many of each team are going to be left, who's going to be working together. So say we get down to 12 cars left and there's 6 Chevys left, well, they have a huge advantage because they're going to be working together. They're going to be able to generate a lot more speed in their draft than, say, if Denny and Kyle were left over, maybe a couple Fords here, and they get drafting with them. Well, the advantage definitely goes to Chevy. So that just adds to the variance in the race, because we know there's not going to be a full field near the end of the race. Maybe there's only 15 to 20. It's still going to matter about numbers, teamwork. So when building your lineup, stacking is definitely something you're going to want to do to take advantage of the upside. Should a team make it through to the end and have multiple cars, like Denny and Kyle, if they make it through to the end, or if you're looking at your Fords and you want to go, say, like Boyer and Almirola, and it's all going to depend, but definitely stacking is something that you're going to want to look at, not just teammates, but manufacturers as well, and I've got that over here if you want to look at that. Now, if you want to look at teams, go down to the entry list. You're going to see car number, you're going to see their make, name, as well as organization. So what I've done here is I sorted by Chevy, or sorted by name here, and then I just sorted by team, so you can go and look. So there's Joe Gibbs Racing, Hamlin, Busch, Truex, and Jones, just so you can easily see if you're trying to stack Toyotas. There's the where you kind of want to start. Or here's Hendrick Motorsports 4, or Front Row Motorsports, or Chip Ganassi, or what have you. So definitely take a look at that entry list if you're making stacks, if you want to get your the most correlation out of your team stack in there. So then in GPP, I talked about Blaney. He's going to the rear, but he still has that 27th starting position. Very attractive for place differential upside, being that you can get from back to front very easily. So not too worried there. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to him, hoping that people maybe see that he's going to the back and might fade him. Even if 5% of the field goes away and starts fading him, I think that opens up a little bit of an advantage for us. Chase Elliott has been terrible at Daytona. As you can see, his ranks here outside the top 30 in career track history, DraftKings and FanDuel scoring, current track history. Showed some speed. Hendrick always has some fast cars here at the Daytona 500. Usually get that pole, like as we see, we start going down and looking, like we got Byron, we got Bowman starting close up front, Jimmy Johnson is starting 6th. So you got those guys up front. Bowman on the front row, and then you're going to have Byron right behind him. Not that I'm targeting guys starting inside the top 5, but Elliott is one of the Hendrick cars that I will look at. He's starting 25th. If he was starting 10th to 15th, I'd probably just full fade, just because he has been absolutely terrible here. I think people will fade him because of that course or that track history, a little bit more than, say, the advantage of having a 25th starting position. So I will take advantage of that if he's going to be a little bit lower owned than, say, Hamlin or Busch. I do like going with Elliott there. And if I am targeting one driver who is starting inside the top 10, I'm probably going to be looking at Joey Logano. He's been awesome on super speedways. He's starting third, so it's going to be very risky. But if you're targeting a driver inside the top 10, you want those dominator points. You get those dominator points, but you need more than that as well, because there's only 200 laps here. So there's not as many laps to lead. We've only seen that, a driver lead 50 or more like twice or three times in the last 8 Daytona races, 100 plus only once, Ryan Blaney. We talked about that. So you really need those dominator points if you're grabbing that driver inside the top 10, and if that happens, you're probably going to get them at low ownership. Any of these guys start in top 10, so definitely look at that. I would look for drivers that have teammates or like manufacturers right there that are going to be able to help them, get out front early, and that really stands out for me if you're going GPP so you got Stenhouse first, so then in third you've got Logano right behind Stenhouse, Ford and Chevy, but here you've got Bowman second, and then you got William Byron right behind him. There may be an opportunity there for Byron to push Bowman out front early, and Bowman could be one of those dominators that we talk about, so keep that in mind as well. Another driver that stands out in the mid-range, not the greatest current track history here, but is Clint Bowyer. He started in 29th. He showed some speed in practice as well, so I'm not concerned at all about their speed. Lots of Fords. They've been doing, good pushing each other. They've been pairing with all the Fords, so the Ford camp's been staying together so far through speed weeks. I definitely like that place differential upside. Like I said, he's kind of struggled here. He hasn't had a top 10 in the last 4 races at Daytona, but he's got the 4th best career average finish, looking at a much larger sample size. So he definitely knows how to get around here, and he's a good driver in terms of super speedway racing. Again, a lot of that has to come with luck, but you don't go 28 races at Daytona and have the 4th best average finish just with all luck. You really got to know what you're doing in terms of the draft, who to draft with, when to make a move, when not to, when to stay on the high line, when to go to the low line. So definitely looking at Clint Bowyer at that price and that starting position. Another one of my core, he's only 20th in my model, but I'm definitely Matt DiBenedetto is a driver I definitely learned a lot from over the first, we had the duel and the clash there as well. Some practices he's pushing really good. Like him and Harvick were working so well together. They're not teammates, but they're Ford teammates. Worked together so well in the duels. He was an excellent pusher. So Matt DiBenedetto, just for that reason alone, that he's been doing very good. He's in a new car. He's in the 21, so he gets a little bit of an upgrade this year, jumping into the Wood Brothers 21, a car that's also won the Daytona 500 in the past. So keep that in mind. And he's got top 10s in 2 of his last 3 Daytona races. 28th last year at the Daytona 500, 27th at the Daytona 500 before that. But he's finished 13th or better in 4 of his last 6 Daytona races. So he's had some success here. He's in a new car. He was pushing the Fords really well. So I think he is starting. Just give me a second. I'll scroll over here. Starting 16th. So there's a little bit of risk there, him starting 16th. But I think if he pairs up with some of those Fords, a top 10 is definitely, and a top 5 is definitely in the cards for him. So the upside is most definitely there. And starting 16th, he may get a little bit overlooked. He's been talked about a lot. On like if you're watching Fox Sports or any of the practices or anything, they're talking about him a lot. So maybe not, but if people are just strictly going with I'm starting drivers outside the top 20, or they have that range of 25th and back, that's where I'm taking the core from, and then maybe one kind of 8th to 12th. A lot of people may miss out on DiBenedetto in their player pools, and I think that's a mistake with Matty D this week. A couple value plays that I'm looking at to kind of tie it all together. Brendan Gaughan, it's his final season. He's racing the 4 super speedway races, and then he's heading back to Vegas to go run the family business, casino business, so good for him. Always looking at him at super speedways. And the thing that really stands out, he's a little bit more of a risk on DraftKings in the low 7K range, but at 2,500, that's a free space on FanDuel for me. He's starting 39th, and will actually start with positive place differential because of the 5 drivers that are going to the rear. So he's jumping up. He's probably going to start the race with like a +5 place differential. He's got top 10 upside. He's been good here at the past. Looking at his, starting 39th, we're not looking for a top 10 out of him for him to hit value, especially on FanDuel at 2,500. But here's his last results at Daytona. So 19th in the summer last year, 23rd at the 500, 12th in the summer in 2018, 28th at the 500, 7th in 2017 in the summer, and 11th at the Daytona 500. So his last 3 years, 6 races, he hasn't finished worse than 28th, and he's finished inside the top 24 times. So that's almost an automatic lock for me. I'm probably going to be overweight. And by overweight, I think his ownership in GBP is probably going to, DraftKings is probably going to be somewhere in the 30-40% range, maybe a little bit higher. I'm probably going to have about 60% and a heck of a lot more on FanDuel. He's probably going to be in 70% of my FanDuel build, 75%, something like that, just because of that price allows us to go grab whoever we want. Another thing I'm going to mention here, you don't exactly need to use all your salary here. Because the fields open up to almost anyone, which means a lot of these guys down here have a chance to win this race. Justin Haley, for instance, #1 in my model. A lot of that has to do with the small sample size. He's raced one race at Daytona. He won it last summer. He started 34th, finished first, so he got the huge place differential boost there. As you can see, he almost got 80 DraftKings points, 72 FanDuel points. Come around here again this year, he's starting 33rd. Hasn't shown a lot of speed in practice with that 16 car, but starting 33rd at that price is definitely got to be on your list. So getting back to what I was talking about, leaving salary on the table is definitely key. Don't go into your lineup, and that I just want to explain what I mean by that. Don't just go into your lineup builds thinking I'm going to leave $1,000 on the table. I'm going to leave $1,500 on the table. Go in, make your player pools like you normally would any given week with any given sport, like I've made mine here. I'm going to go and plug 4 or 5 guys in, and I'm going to build a lineup. And when I do that, if I have $2,500 left over, I'm not concerned. If I like my lineup, if I have the place differential in there, I've stuck to my, okay, I'm going to have 4 drivers that are starting 25th and back. I'm going to have 2 drivers, in some lineups, I'm going to have 2 drivers, say, 10th to 20th, somewhere in there, or if I open it up a little bit more, I'm going to follow those rules. But when I place the drivers in, like I said, if there's $1,500 left over, $1,800, I'm not worried about it. If there's only $200, I'm not worried about it. I'm not going in thinking I'm going to leave money on the table. I'm still building lineups with the drivers that I like, and then I'm going to look at it after, and I'm just not concerned. In terms, in comparison, we're talking basketball, hockey. If I go and build a lineup and I'm leaving $1,000 on the table, I am immediately going and figuring out a way to upgrade one of my players to get a higher floor, higher upside, and try and use as much salary as possible. NASCAR, smaller fields. We're only get a maximum of 40 drivers every week. Xfinity, that's even smaller. So a way to take advantage and maybe not have a duplicate lineup a lot of weeks is leaving salary on the table. And again, don't force yourself to leave that money on the table. Build lineups you like, and if it works out that you've left that money on the table, great. Don't worry about it. Don't fret. Just move on. I have a lot of lineups already built for the Daytona 500 where I've left over $3,000 on the table. There was one I was actually breaking down though in chat last night, looking at some of the optimal lineups over the last 2 or 3 years at Daytona. There was one year where there was almost $19,000 left on the table in the optimal winning lineup of tournaments. Like in the optimal, you can go to, like, I think it's the Line Star app, and you can pull up any year, any race, and you can look at the optimal lineup. Doesn't necessarily mean that's the lineup that won the tournament, won the contest. That just means that's the optimal lineup in terms of cash and points per dollar, and leaving almost $19,000 on the table. And on average over the last 6 races, there's something like $2,300 or $2,500 on average left on the table. So keep that in mind when you're building your lineups. I went over a few core plays here. If you got any questions, jump over to dfsr.com. Hit me up in the chat. I'm going to be in there all day talking Xfinity, talking Cup Series, talking the Daytona 500. We've got NHL tonight as well. We've got a big slate, so I'll be auditing lines there, filling out the cheat sheet for that as well. And thanks for watching the video. And if you can also ask questions. If you got a question, definitely drop it in the comments below the video here. Make sure to like and subscribe. We got a lot more videos coming out. Got the live show tomorrow morning. Make sure to join me for that. That's going to be about 10 to 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Going to be dropping the live show link in chat, so you can join me for that if you've got lots of questions. And yeah, let's go get some green screens and let's crush this Daytona 500. Thanks for joining me, everyone.